Odysseus grips a handmade steering oar while night closes over the sea. Behind him is the island of a goddess. Ahead, somewhere beyond black water, is home. He watches star groups wheel above the mast and keeps one bright northern pattern to his left. Days later, a ridge rises from the horizon, dark and rounded like a shield. The scene looks practical, a sailor using sky, wind, and landfall. Yet it sits inside a world of monsters, enchanted islands, and ships that can think for themselves. The problem is not whether the story is magical, it is whether the magic carries real seamanship inside it. The question is precise. Does the Odyssey preserve genuine Mediterranean navigation knowledge beneath its mythical geography? A useful part of the answer is yes, but not as a hidden map. To prove more, we would need signs that match working practices, not just poetic decoration. Ancient listeners, sailors, and storytellers had to find the details intelligible. A false answer would turn a myth into a route chart or dismiss practical knowledge because it appears in myth. The obvious answer is the star passage. A modern viewer sees Odysseus steer by constellations and thinks the case is solved. Stars are real. Sailors use them. The poem names recognizable patterns, so the voyage must preserve navigation. That is tempting, because celestial steering feels like hard evidence inside a dreamlike story. But a star name alone cannot locate Calypso's island, Scheria, or Ithaca. It gives direction, not coordinates. It may also be learned lore, passed through poetry by people who understood the sign without having sailed the exact route. The visible sky can prove that the poem knows a technique. It cannot prove that every island below it is real. In Book 5 of the Odyssey, the surviving text depicts Calypso telling Odysseus to keep the bear on his left as he sails. The same passage names the Pleiades, Bootes, and Orion, then has him sight distant Phaeacian mountains on the 18th day. That is a concrete wayfinding sequence, hold a broad heading by the sky, then confirm arrival by land. Anyone familiar with northern stars could understand the instruction, because the bear marks the northern part of the sky for a Greek observer. The clue changes the case from vague maritime atmosphere to an operational scene. But the poem also gives the Phaeacians marvelous ships that need no pilots, so one technical passage cannot make the whole voyage a logbook. A modern study of seafaring practice in the Odyssey tested the poem's nautical details against winds, routes, ship handling, and environmental behavior. Its strongest point is cumulative. The star scene does one job. It explains how a sailor can hold direction when land has vanished. A mast failure scene does another. Separated forestays and an intact backstay match how raking can fail. Cape Malaya's dangerous winds explain why a homeward voyage can be blown off course. Plausible routes between Crete, Egypt, Phoenicia, and Libya show that the poem's eastern and southern sea lanes are not random decoration. Morning land breezes and shelter behind headlands fit the small decisions that matter near shore. A separate study of night travel modeled visibility and showed why those decisions were risky. A coast visible more than 20 nautical miles away by day might shrink to less than a third of a nautical mile in complete darkness, or under 2 nautical miles in full moonlight. That gives the star passage its real stakes. Offshore, stars and wind can guide a direction. Near land, the sailor needs lookout, timing, and recognition. Each check covers a weakness in the previous one. Stars cannot identify a harbor. Landmarks cannot help before they are visible. Ship's skill matters because the right sign is useless if the vessel cannot answer it. A study of cognitive mapping in early Greek sea stories helps explain how the same clue changes meaning as it moves through the voyage. To a stranger offshore, the bear is a directional aid. Keep north to the left and continue eastward. To a coastal pilot, the evidence shifts to capes, reefs, clouds, island silhouettes, and remembered approaches. To an audience hearing the poem, a route can be stored as an ordered set of sights and dangers, not as a map with measured lines. A rival listener, meanwhile, could accept the seamanship while doubting the place name. That is why Odysseus's claim to be nearing a known world becomes stronger only when the sky course turns into a recognizable landfall. Acceptance changes the practice. The sailor stops merely surviving open water and begins judging shores, shelter, and approach. The poem's knowledge is not a grid. It is a chain of remembered views. The proof breaks when readers try to pin every monster and island to a modern coordinate. A study of Sicily and Italy in the Odyssey separates named Western contexts from later or possible localizations of the wanderings. It notes that Sicily and Italy are not explicitly made the setting of Odysseus's adventures in the surviving poem, even if some traditions may have linked episodes such as the Cyclopes, Scylla, Charybdis, or Circe with the central Mediterranean. That is where proof stops. A real regional memory can feed a myth without turning the final poem into a navigational chart. The surviving conclusion is narrower but stronger. The poem carries Mediterranean seafaring knowledge. It does not preserve a recoverable itinerary from Troy to Ithaca through named mythical stops. The evidence supports a high-confidence yes to practical knowledge and a low-confidence no to hidden cartography. Directly attested is what the poem depicts: celestial orientation, visual landfall, hazards at capes, the need for skilled steering, and the contrast between ordinary ships and magical ones. The strongest inference is that the Odyssey drew on a broad oral tradition of Mediterranean seafaring experience, including real techniques for direction, weather, shore recognition, and route memory. What remains disputed is whether particular Western episodes echo Sicily, Italy, or other locations. The tempting conclusion that Odysseus's wanderings can be plotted stop by stop lacks support. This episode reconstructs a modern interpretation of incomplete evidence, grounded in an ancient source and tested against maritime practice. The bear on Odysseus's left is no longer a clue to a secret map. It is a reminder that navigation often depends on shared signs before it depends on exact positions. Modern life still runs on that invisible trust: instruments, landmarks, protocols, and trained interpretation turning uncertainty into a usable direction. Alright, and that was today's curiosity from Hidden Axiom. We hope you enjoyed it, and if this video answered your question, leave a like, share your next question in the comments, and subscribe to keep discovering. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious.